மாயனை மண்ணு வட மதுரை மைந்தனை மாயனை மண்ணு வட மதுரை மைந்தனை தூய பெரு நீர் யமுனை துறைவனே தூய பெரு நீர் யமுனை துறைவனே ஆயர் குலத்தினில் தோன்றும் அணி விளக்கை ஆயர் குலத்தினில் தோன்றும் அணி விளக்கை தாயை குடல் விளக்கம் செய்த தாமோதரனே தூயோமாய் வந்து நாம் தூமலர் தூவி தொழுது தூயோமாய் வந்து நாம் தூமலர் தூவி தொழுது வாயினால் பாடி மனத்தினால் சிந்திக்க வாயினால் பாடி மனத்தினால் சிந்திக்க போய பிழையும் புகுதருவானின்றனவும் போய பிழையும் புகுதருவானின்றனவும் தீயினில் தூசாகும் செப்பேலோரும் பவாய் தீயினில் தூசாகும் செப்பேலோரும் பவாய்
Good morning. Welcome to the first of the TAG annual virtual December lectures by V. Sriram. Today, Sriram will enthrall us with an account of music at the Sri Parthasarathy Swami temple. The lecture is being arranged and sponsored by the TAG group of companies. Music at the Parthasarathy temple has a hallowed history. The temple itself is some 2000 years old. Sriram will take us through major music events at the temple and some of the top music personalities who have performed here. His talk will be a charming medley of history, music, and anecdotage. As all of you know, Sriram is one of Chennai's cultural celebrities. He is an expert on Tamil Nadu's history and heritage, an incisive critic of Carnatic music, an author of more than 20 books, the editor of Madras Musings, a secretary of the Music Academy. He is also a mesmeric speaker who can cast a spell on any audience, particularly on music. Sriram delivered 35 lectures on music stars of South India during 18 years of the South India Heritage Program from February 2002 to February 2020. This program has wound up, but Mr. R.T. Chari has fortunately decided to continue the practice of 2 lectures by V. Sriram during the December music season. Sriram's journey as a chronicler and historian of Carnatic music began at TAG Center with a talk on Papanasam Sivan in September 2003. He then went on to profile all the leading singers, composers, and institutions of Carnatic music. These lectures led to his first book, Carnatic Summer, which former President Dr. Abdul Kalam read all night at a single sitting. It also led to several other books, including one on the Music Academy. It led to many awards and rewards, too numerous to mention here. Sriram's journey moved in other directions too, and he has become a much in demand corporate historian. He has pioneered the concept of heritage walks and tours. Over the past decade, he has organized nearly 100 heritage walks or tours, including tours of Tanjavur, Kumbakonam, Thiruvayaru, and so on. Sriram's journey at TAC Center continues. The series of December talks beginning today may well become a top tourist attraction of the music season. Over to V. Sriram.
Good morning, friends. We meet here under what I can only term as extraordinary circumstances. When I am speaking to you through a camera and you are listening to this talk and also viewing the presentation. Many things have changed in the last 10 or 11 months. But I am overwhelmed by the fact that the affection that Mr. Chari has for me has not. There are certain things that remain constant even in this ever-changing world. And he has gone to this extent of ensuring that a recorded talk reaches all of you. So many, many thanks to him, not only for this talk, but for all that he has done for me since the year 2002. Many thanks to Mr. Madhu, who has painstakingly introduced me each year, twice every year, not just once, and each time with a difference. Sometimes I wonder what is there that is new that can be told, but Mr. Madhu always finds something that is new. Today it is with great pleasure that I present to you the topic of music in the Sri Parthasarathy Swami temple. This is a shrine that I hold very, very dear to my heart. Perhaps because my late father shared the name or was named after the principal deity in this temple, Venkatakrishnan. And of course, when I first saw that deity when I was 10, I can never ever forget that great love that I developed for that magnificent personality, almost 8 or 9 feet in height, big handlebar moustache, impressive and tall with the goddess Rukmini by his side. Those who have seen Venkatakrishnan, the Moolavar of this temple, will never be able to forget him. And then we have the Utsava Murti, Sri Parthasarathy himself, and I think of my grandmother who first told me about how I needed to look at the face of that icon and realize that it was full of pit marks. And she said that those are the marks caused by the arrows of Bhishma. And every time I look at that idol, I think about that anecdote that my grandmother had told me. So this temple is a shrine that I hold very, very dear to my heart. And even though I have not visited it in the last so many months, today talking about it here in front of all of you makes me feel as though I have entered that temple once again, and I am standing in front of the sanctum looking at the awesome beauty of Venkatakrishnan. This is a temple that is not just one shrine. There are several sub-shrines in this temple apart from the main sanctum to Venkatakrishnan Parthasarathy with Rukmini by his side, and the Lord is not alone over here. He is Saparivara, he is with his whole family. So you've got Balarama, the brother, then you have got Satyaki, another brother, you've got the son Pradyumna, and you have the grandson Aniruddha. They are all standing along with him in that sanctum. So this is the main sanctum of this temple. And behind, facing the opposite direction, is a shrine to Narasimha. So this is basically two shrines sandwiching each other. And the shrine at the back, the Perumal, is known as Telliya Singa Perumal, corrupted in modern times to Thulasinga Perumal. Apart from this, you have a magnificent Padmanabha, Ranganatha Swami, reclining on Adisesha, with Sridevi and Bhudevi by his side and Brahma coming up from his navel. And then you have Rama, who is not with just Lakshmana and Sita and Hanuman, he is with Bharata and Shatrughna as well. So that is a very interesting iconographic representation. Finally, you have Gajendra Varada. Lord Varadaraja, as he came to save the elephant Gajendra from the clutches of the crocodile. And how is he sculpted over here? He is sculpted flying on Garuda. So he is coming to the rescue of Gajendra. So he is known as Gajendra Varada. After all this, you also have two other shrines. One is, of course, to Andal. And then you have a magnificent shrine to Vedavalli Tayar, who is the consort of Lord Ranganatha in this particular temple. So these broadly comprise the main important sanctums in this temple. In addition, you have numerous sub-shrines. There is a beautiful Anjaneya Swami inside a pillar, facing a Rama, with a priest of the Madhva order worshipping him. You have got the Rangapadukas facing Andal, and so if you have not been able to see Lord Ranganatha in the sanctum, you can actually just touch the Padukas. So you can actually go and touch the feet of Lord Ranganatha as they are placed outside. So this is a very, very fascinating temple. Let me allow you to feast your eyes on Lord Venkatakrishnan himself. So you have those beautiful handlebar moustache, and there he is tall and two-armed with just a conch in his hand. Because when he came to battle as the charioteer of Arjuna in Kurukshetra, he promised that he would not touch any weapon. So he is only carrying a conch in his hand. The sword and the dagger that you see, they are all later additions to the icon. It's a Pallava period icon, and next to that you have got Rukmini, and you can also see Balarama on one side. The others are all standing by the side, whom you cannot make out over here. Many people in my family began to grow moustaches sometime in the 1960s. And I remember that there was a storm of protest with my grandmother leading the conservative element, saying that you had no right to grow these moustaches. And my uncle, who was always the clever one in the family, said, when Parthasarathy has got it, I have every right to grow it. And that silenced my grandmother, and after that we all became splendidly mustachioed. In his introduction, Mr. Madhu said that this temple is around 2000 years old. And where do we find the proof for this age? From the verses of the Alvars themselves. There are 12 Alvars, as is well known, and 3 out of them have composed verses on the Sri Parthasarathy Swami temple. What is wonderful is that the sequential development of this temple, from being a small shrine to a magnificent precinct, is completely captured in the works of these 3 Alvars. So the first is Pei Alvar, who belongs to an age which we are even unable to estimate. It is believed that Pei Alvar was born in Mylapore, and therefore one of his verses describes the temple. And how does he describe it? Vandudaitha ventiraigal sempavala venmuttam andi vilakkum ani vilakkam endai or alli thamarayal ondriya sirmarvan thiruvalli keniyan sendru. He describes the temple entirely in terms of natural beauty. Vandudaitha ventiraigal, the waves are coming and kicking the shore. And in the process, what is it that they are bringing? They are bringing Sempavara Venmuttam. So they are bringing white pearls and red corals. And what is the time of the day when they are doing this? Andi Vilakkum Ani Vilakkam. So at that time it is sunset and lamps are being lit, At the same time, the sky is in a combination of white and red, just like the pearls and the corals that have come onto the shore. And then there is further red and white imagery. The poet has not finished with it. Endai or allit thamarayal ondriya seermarvan. The Lord has got the lady of the lotus on his chest. And what is she? Alli Tamarayal. Alli is white, Tamarai is red. So once again, he has brought in the red and the white combination. Thiruvallikeniyan Sendru. In Thiruvallikeni, where the waves come and kick and the pearls and the corals are deposited on the shore, in the evening the lamps are being lit and there we have the Lord. Let us go and worship him. That is what he says. So at that time, in Peyalvar's time, it must have been a very simple place, a small shrine, perhaps just a brick structure. Then suddenly, when we come to Tirumezhiyalvar, in Tirumezhiyalvar we find that there is now an icon that is being described. Thalal ulagam alanda asaivehol vaala kidandarulum vaithiravan. நீள் ஓதம் வந்து அலைக்கும் மாமயிலை மா அல்லிக்கேணியான் ஐந்தலை வாய் நாகத்து அணை. So now he is describing a magnificent reclining deity lying down on a serpent bed where there are 5 hoods to the serpent. ஐந்தலை வாய் நாகத்து அணை. Now where do we find this? We find this in the sanctum of Ranganatha next to Venkatakrishnan or Parthasarathy. And what does he say? You are so tired that because you measured the 3 worlds, that is why you are lying immobile without opening your mouth on top of this serpent. Now when you see this, you realize that Lord Ranganatha was perhaps here before Lord Venkatakrishnan came. And that is how the temple tradition even now is. They believe that the sanctum to Lord Ranganatha is even earlier to the sanctum to Lord Venkatakrishnan. So we have in Tirumezhiyalvar a verse which just describes Lord Ranganatha and nothing else. By the time Tirumangai Alvar, the last of the Alvars, come, and he sings in the 8th and the 9th centuries, probably in the 8th and the 9th centuries, this has become a full-fledged temple with all its sanctums. He dedicates an entire set of 10 verses. The first 4 or 5 describe Lord Venkatakrishnan as he appears holding a conch, standing in front of Arjuna's chariot. All that is described. And he says that Vedathai Vedathin Suvai Payane Vilmiya Munivargal Vilungum Kodilir Kaniyai Nandanar Kalitrai Adiyai Amudai Yennai Atkonda Appane Oppatra Madargal Varum Madamamailai Thiruvallikeni Kandene. That is how he describes the Lord. And then he goes on to describe the other sanctums, and that is what makes it most interesting. Bharatanum Tambi Shatrugnanum Ilakkumananodu Maithiliyum. So suddenly you have Rama being described over here, not just with Sita and Hanuman, but with Bharata and Lakshmana and Shatrughna. So that is exactly how the icon is in the temple. Then the next verse is even more interesting. How does it describe Narasimha? பள்ளியில் ஓதி வந்த தன் சிறுவன் வாயில் ஓர் 1000 நாமம் ஒள்ளிய ஆகி போத ஆங்கு அதனுக்கு ஒன்றும் ஓர் பொறுப்பு இலனாசி பிள்ளையை சீறி வெகுண்டு தூண் படைப்ப பிறை எயிற்று அனல்விழி பேழ்வாய் தெள்ளிய சிங்கமாகிய தேவை திருவல்லிக்கேணி கண்டேனே. Hiranyakashipu realizes that his son is coming back from school, learning some new things which are not entirely in the syllabus. பள்ளியில் ஓதி வந்த தன் சிறுவன் வாயில் ஓர் 1000 நாமம் ஒள்ளிய ஆகி போத. He gets very angry and he kicks the pillar, whereupon this Telliya Singam emerges out from that pillar. That Telliya Singam I saw in Thiruvallikeni. That is what Tirumangai Alvar describes. And then he describes the third verse. மீன் அமர் பொய்கை நாள் மலர் கொய்வான் வெட்கையினோடு சென்று இழிந்த கான் அமர் வேழும் கையெடுத்து அலற. So the elephant went to pluck flowers in the water. When the crocodile came and clutched at its foot, it lifted its trunk and screamed. And then what happened? ஆனையின் துயரம் தீர் புல் ஊர்ந்து சென்று நின்று ஆழி தொட்டானை. In order to destroy the suffering of the elephant, he immediately got onto the bird. Pull urnd. Sendru nindru aali thottane. He went immediately, he saw for a moment, and then he only touched his Sudarshana Chakram, which immediately went and beheaded the crocodile. So this is the beautiful word picture that Thirumangai Alvar gives. So by his time, we can realize all the sanctums were ready. And that was in the 8th or the 9th century. In fact, Thirumangai Alvar gives all the credit to a Tondai Mandalam king, whom he doesn't mention by name. But today, we feel that it must have been one of the Pallava kings who ruled at that time. And therefore, this shrine takes its origin from the Pallava period. The Alvars themselves, Pei Alvar, Thirumalizhai Alvar and Thirumangai Alvar, all three of them who sang on this particular temple. Now, it is very easy in modern times to say that when we don't know the dates of the Alvars, how do we know that this temple came from the Pallava period? Well, the shrine has got its own history, of which it keeps giving us little glimpses every once in a while. Just a couple of years ago, when the temple's consecration was happening, a piece of plaster fell off, and when they looked inside what was there, they found an entire fresco of the Kurukshetra war done during the Pallava period. And that establishes the age of the temple for people who may think that, we have no idea when the Alvars lived, so we have no idea about the antiquity of their verses. Well, frescoes have also been showing us what is the age of that temple. And the warriors as depicted in that fresco, they are all magnificently mustachioed, exactly like Lord Venkatakrishnan is in this particular shrine. It's one of the misfortunes of Chennai region or Madras region that we have huge gaps in its history. Many people believe that Madras or Chennai as a city came into existence only with the arrival of the East India Company. There are several others who deny this and say that there has been a continuous history. We do know that several of the villages like Tiruvallikeni, Mailai, Tiruvattriyur, Tirunirmalai, all of them have had a continuous history. But we have no idea as to what Chennai or Madras was. We have no idea whether these two villages, whether they were two villages that became one, or did the English create them? Did they exist before the arrival of the English? We have no idea about any of these things. But what we do realize is that after the 12th and the 13th century and maybe a little bit of the 15th century, there's a huge gap, and then we only have colonial history that helps us to reconstruct. We have no idea what happened in between. So then we come to the 19th century. In 1837, Tyagaraja comes to Madras. He is invited by Kovur Sundara Mudali, who is one of the Dubashas of the East India Company. And when Kovur Sundara Mudali invites Tyagaraja, he comes here, he stays in Sundara Mudali's house in Bandar Street in Georgetown. The house is still standing, though they decided that they had to demolish the room in which Tyagaraja stayed. Can you believe it? This is how our heritage is protected. The building is there, but the room in which Tyagaraja stayed has been demolished. So when I went there and asked the man who owns it, எதுக்கு அதை இடிச்சிட்டீங்க? இல்ல ரொம்ப பழசா இருந்துச்சு, தியாகராஜர் வந்த அளவுக்கு ஒரு கௌரவமா இல்ல, அதனால இடிச்சு புதுப்பிக்கலாம்னு சொல்லி எடுத்துட்டோம். So this is how we protect our history and our heritage. Anyway, Tyagaraja came here, and Sundara Mudali took him to the Tiruvattriyur temple where Tyagaraja composed 5 songs, as we know. He also went to Sundara Mudali's house, temple in Kovur, and there he composed 5 songs on the temple there. There is a continuing legend that Tyagaraja visited the Parthasarathy Swami temple. Professor Sambamurthy writes that he has heard, or that he has come to know, that there is a legend in the temple that Tyagaraja not only came there, he also composed a song, Sari Vadalina Sri Parthasaratini Judare. Unfortunately, we don't have any such lyric available in Tyagaraja's compilation, and therefore we have to say that this is an unsubstantiated legend. Perhaps he came, perhaps he visited the temple, perhaps he composed a song. We have no idea. This was in 1837, but around 35 or maybe even a little earlier, maybe around 37 years prior to Tyagaraja coming here, Muthuswami Dikshitar was here as well. His father, Ramaswamy Dikshitar, had been invited to come and settle in Madras city, And so the family had moved sometime in the 1790s when they lived in Thiruvattriyur. And it is believed that Dikshitar did compose a song on Sri Parthasarathy. Let us listen to the composition and then we will go ahead with the rest of the presentation. Now, it is very easy to accept that this is a composition of Muthuswami Dikshitar. It has got the Mudra, Guru Guha coming in it. But the question is it really a Dikshitar Kriti? We have no idea. Because the song is absent from the compilation of Dikshitar Kritis as given by his grandnephew, Subbarama Dikshitar. And it is also a very lightweight composition. It does not carry any of the iconographic details of this particular temple. Dikshitar, who in every shrine that he goes to digs out all kinds of unknown facts and puts them in a song, it's very unlikely that he could have composed this. But today we do accept that that was a Dikshitar Kriti, and therefore we have to accept the fact that we have to say that there is a legend that Dikshitar came here and he did compose over here. Post the time of the Carnatic Trinity, we appear to be on firmer ground. Shama Shastri, one of the Trinity, of course, did not come over here, but his son, Subbaraya Shastri, definitely did, and he came and left behind a magnificent Kriti in Yadukula Kamboji, Ninnu Sevinchina. In fact, he begins a tradition of composers preferring Yadukula Kamboji for composing on Lord Parthasarathy. Whether the Lord himself had a fascination for this raga, I am not in a position to say. But then, perhaps because he came from Yadukula and the raga's name is Yadukula Kamboji, we find that no less than 4 composers have endowed songs on this temple in this particular raga. Let us listen to Brinda and Mukta sing a snatch of Subbaraya Shastri's composition, Ninnu Sevinchina. Kanakangi Sri Rukmini Hridayabja Dinamane. So for the lotus of Rukmini's heart, he is like the sun. Such a beautiful description of Lord Parthasarathy. We do not know how Subbaraya Shastri looked, but we have an idea as to how the next composer that I am going to deal with, Mysore Sadashiva Rao, looked. And this is a painting of him. Sadashiva Rao came from the tradition of Tyagaraja. Tyagaraja's disciple was Valajapet Venkatramana Bhagavatar. Sadashiva Rao was his disciple. And he came to Madras and left behind 2 beautiful kritis. One is Vachama Gocharundadini in Athana and the other is Sri Parthasarathy in Bhairavi. We'll listen to Nisha Rajagopal sing a part of this song before we go further.
विनुतघमोचनारविन्द लोचन मापहि
So it says Thiruvallikeni, Kairavani. The Kairavani is the river that flowed at one time by the side of this temple, and it ended in that lake of lilies, which we called Thiruvallikeni. It is not the temple tank that we see today. It is a mythical lake that existed here at one point of time. So these legends are all mentioned in that particular composition, thereby ensuring that we have no doubts that this composition was created at this particular shrine. Then we have yet another 19th century composer, Seyyur Sengalvaraya Shastri. Sengalvaraya Shastri composes in Yadukula Kamboji once again, and he leaves behind Parthasarathy Bhajiyinchani. It describes the deity over here, and then it also says Shri Thiruvallikeni Varninchi, because he lived in Seyyur, which is not very far from here. He mentions not only the idol, but he also ensures that he mentions the name of the town. Therefore, we have a clear idea that this composition was created here as well. Now we come to a very interesting incident in the life of the great composer and musician Mahavaidyanatha Sivan. Mahavaidyanatha Sivan was really the first Carnatic music star. Had he existed today, he would have had any number of followers on Twitter. He would have had a YouTube channel that would have so many million followers. He would be on Facebook. People will be following everything about his life down to the smallest detail. Very interestingly, even in his lifetime, people followed him and noted the smallest of details. In fact, there is a 2-volume biography written by his very admiring disciple Vasudevanallur Subbaya Bhagavatar, which gives you an almost day-to-day account of this personality. So it's not just today that celebrities do not have any privacy. Even then, it is very clear that the most intimate details of a person's life was documented if he or she was a celebrity. Now, Mahavaidyanatha Sivan was an exceedingly orthodox personality, with very clear views about how music had to be performed, what was expected of people who organized these performances, and so on. So he would come very often from his native village of Vayacheri to Madras, and he would give concerts over here. And large number of people would go to attend these performances, which would happen in a school building invariably, in Mint Street. It was called the Tondai Mandalam Tuluva Vellalar School, and that is where the concert would invariably happen. Now, the practice in those days was you did not sell tickets for anybody's performances. In the early days in Madras, a rich patron or a group of patrons would get together and organize a performance. They would take care of all the expenses of the performing musician, and the audience would not have to do anything except come and listen to the performance and go home. Then when the sabhas came into existence, what they did was they would circulate a salva among the audience. Whatever money people felt they could contribute, they would give. And apart from what the sabha was paying the musician, this money would also go to the musician. Now, Vaidyanatha Sivan's popularity was immense. And the Munusami Naidu, who was the sabha secretary, he came up with this bright idea that after all they sell tickets for plays, they sell tickets for Western music performances. Why don't we sell tickets for Mahavaidyanatha Sivan's concert as well? And so on that particular day when Vaidyanatha Sivan was coming down from wherever he was staying in Madras to the venue of the concert, he found several people returning. And he asked them what it was. They said, we went there and we were told that we'll have to pay a kalana or whatever it is to listen to your music. We didn't come with any money, which incidentally is a strong Carnatic tradition. Even today, people go to concerts without any money. So they'll get down from their Mercedes Benzes and then they'll say, Patruva tiketa, and then they'll get back and go home. So this all are welcome is the only thing that attracts audiences in Carnatic music. They expect musicians to live on sweet air, compositions, and devotion. There is even a school of thought that says that if a musician's music has to be good, he or she has to be poor. They cannot make any money. This is the audience behavior in the world of Carnatic music. Very sadly so. So anyway, so these people were going back. Vaidyanatha Sivan stopped them and asked them exactly, and then they told him we didn't come with any money. Vaidyanatha Sivan was incensed. He went and fired the Sabha secretary and said, I do not believe in selling my art like this. I will refuse to sing for you. So he immediately went to the Parthasarathy Swami temple with his accompanists and he performed there. Huge crowd collected and they all now voluntarily gave money on a salva and he collected 250 rupees. They all said, you must come tomorrow and perform. Second day he again went, performed again 250 rupees was collected. They told him you must come tomorrow as well. So third day he went and collected 250 rupees. At a time when the average musician, and he was a top ranking musician, they earned 50 rupees for a performance. He had collected 750 rupees at the end of 3 concerts back to back at the Parthasarathy Swami temple. But this was a man of a very saintly disposition and all the money was divided and distributed. 250 rupees went to his accompanists, 250 rupees went to the Chidambaram temple, 250 rupees went to his village temple. He just went home happily. This is the kind of musician that today's Carnatic music audiences would just love, Now, Vaidyanatha Sivan's bitter rival and contemporary was Patnam Subramanya Iyer. He was also from Tiruvayyaru, which is where Mahavaidyanatha Sivan lived. But because he came to Madras and lived here for 12 years, he lived in Patnam. And therefore, he became Patnam Subramanya Iyer. Patnam Subramanya Iyer has composed a beautiful song in the Raga Kedara, which you will now hear Sanjay Subramaniam sing. While you listen to it, you will be able to also see that it describes 3 of the 5 sanctums in this particular temple.
ಕಮಲನಾಭ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಕಮಲನಾಭ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಕಮಲನಾಭ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಕಮಲನಾಭ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಕಮಲಸಲ ನೂದ ಚರಣ ಕಮಲನಾಭ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಕಮಲಸಲ ನೂದ ಚರಣ ಕಮಲನಾಭ ಶ್ರೀರಮಣ ಕಮಲಸಲ ನೂದ కరుణతోను గజరాజుని కాశీ రక్షించినదిగాన కరుణతోను గజరాజుని కాశీ రక్షించినదిగాన కరుణతోను గజరాజుని కాశీ రక్షించినదిగాన కరుణతోను గజరాజుని కాశీ రక్షించినదిగాన వరపార్థ సారథియను
It talks about Kamalanabha, Sri Ramana in the Anupallavi, which is Padmanabha. And then it says Karunato Gajaraju Niki in the Charanam. And then it also says Varaparthasarathi. So there are 3 sanctums out of the 5 that are described in that one particular song by Patnam Subramanya Iyer. In the late 19th century, early 20th century, we had these 2 brothers, Tachur Singaracharlu, Pedda Singaracharlu and Chinna Singaracharlu. The elder one was called Pedda Azhaga Singaracharlu, and Veena Dhanamal is supposed to have said he was neither Azhaga nor was he Singaram. But then Dhanamal, rarely approved of anybody. But these 2 were very helpful in running a sabha called the Madras Jubilee Gayan Samaj, which was essentially meant to bring together Englishmen and Indians and get the Westerners to appreciate our music. And for that, they needed books to be printed. And these two began bringing out a series of books in Carnatic music. They were one of the early publishers of classical South Indian music. They also composed Varnams. And one is the very popular Varnam Ninnu Kori in Vasanta, which is again on Parthasarathy of Tiruvallikeni. Let's listen to M.S. Subbalakshmi sing this for us. In the early years of the 20th century, actually the exercise starts in the late 19th century itself, we had the budget manager of the Madras Secretariat, Fort St. George, A.M. Chinnaswamy Mudaliar. Chinnaswamy Mudaliar was a Roman Catholic, but he developed a great interest in Carnatic music. And he wanted to document Carnatic music in Western classical notation. Prior to that, we did not have an established form of notation in our art form. And he then learnt the songs of Tyagaraja, wrote them down in staff notation, and got an orchestra to play them to Valajapet Krishnaswamy Bhagavatar, who was one of the disciples of Tyagaraja, in order for him to vouch that the songs are played as per notation. Having done that, and having begun to release the Tyagaraja compositions in notations as a form of a booklet, he then developed a great desire to get Dikshitar Kritis also to be done the same way. And that is when Subbarama Dikshitar, who was then the Asthana Vidwan of Ettayapuram, the two of them discovered each other by writing letters to the Hindu, which were published as letters to the editor. And then Chinnaswamy Mudaliar invites Subbarama Dikshitar to come to Madras, and he comes and stays in Triplicane in a place called Mir Sahib Pet. So the orthodox Hindu Subbarama Dikshitar, living in Muslim-dominated Mir Sahib Pet, teaches Dikshitar Kritis to Roman Catholic A.M. Chinnaswamy Mudaliar. And today we talk about secularism and wear it as a badge and all that. These were men who were doing it without even realizing what it was. And eventually this would lead to the great book, the Sangeeta Sampradaya Pradarshini, but I have already spoken about that earlier in this very same forum, so I'm not going to repeat it. Subbarama Dikshitar composes a composition, once again, no prizes for guessing, in Yadukula Kamboji on Parthasarathy. I don't have a recording of that here for you, unfortunately. A contemporary of Subbarama Dikshitar was Ramanathapuram Puchi Srinivasa Iyengar, and he too visits this temple and leaves behind this song, which his disciple Ariyakudi Ramanuja Iyengar used to sing very often in his concerts, set in Raga Madhyamavati. Let's listen to it before we go on with this presentation. Tiger Varadacharya and M.D. Ramanathan, Guru and Sishya, both composed on this temple. Of course, M.D. Ramanathan's is once again in the Raga Yadukula Kamboji, but Tiger I did not know had composed on this temple, and I found this very, very recently. When Tiger was working in Annamalai University, he was asked to compose songs in all the genres, that is Geetam, Swarajati, Varnams in Tamil, so that students could learn. And one Geetam, which is so beautiful, it is set in the Raga Kalyani, and it goes like this: Padam Taruvai Thiru Parthasarathy, Bhavapini Agatridum Paramadayala, Nidam Peruharul Malai Poyindiduvone, Nigarilayena Ihapara Turaivone, Kaninirai Solai Ser Thiruvallikkeniyil, Kadi Malaraludan Siranda Narchevayum, Suramuni Kootangal Todum Vedamudane, Karai Purandodidum Arul Varadane Nin. This is the composition that Tiger Varadacharya has, a small but exquisite Geetam on Lord Parthasarathy of Triplicane. Now, those are the songs that were created on the temple. But the very presence of such a culturally rich shrine in the middle of this settlement called Thiruvallikeni made sure that a lot of music was practiced just around the place itself, in those 4 streets and all the streets leading away right up to Mylapore. Now here you have a photograph of the Hindu high school. This is where some of the early sabhas of Madras actually functioned from, and G.N. Balasubramaniam's father, G.V. Narayan Swami Iyer, was the headmaster of this school. And he was also secretary of the Parthasarathy Swami Sabha that functioned from this building for several years. We also have on Big Street C. Saraswati Bai, the first woman from a non-Devadasi background to take to the performing arts. Once again, I have spoken about her in this particular forum, so I'm not going to repeat her story. But she had to suffer a lot of calumny, lot of slander, lot of opposition from established male artists in the field, and also from the orthodox element generally prevalent in Carnatic music and Harikatha listening circles. Saraswati Bai became a foremost exponent of the art of Katha Kalakshepam or Harikatha, her first performance being in the year 1909. And generally, most women musicians of the post-Devadasi era followed the lead that was given by C. Saraswati Bai. She herself has written that only a person with a cracked voice would become a Harikatha exponent. This was in self-deprecatory humor. Bhagna karshaha bhagavataha bhavati. This is what she says in a particular book. But that just to establish to you that Saraswati Bai was second to none in music, I'm going to play her voice over here for you. She lived for almost 40 years in 3 houses that became one large house, number 150, 151 and 152 on Big Street, which is actually Veeraraghava Mudhali Street, and performed several times at the Gangai Kondan Mandapam in the Thiruvallikeni temple. This is a 4-pillared mandapam that stands at the end of Singarachari Street. In today's parlance, it is known as Gangana Mandapam. It has a beautiful original name being Gangai Kondan Mandapam. There is a lovely photograph of Saraswati Bai, which in the last minute I couldn't locate. I wish I had put it over here, of her performing with her hands flailing, with holding chipla and all that. And seated in the audience are Rajaji, then the Chief Minister of Madras, seated on the floor. And next to him is a person who is remarking with his hands like this. You know, he is kind of matching the expression of Saraswati Bai by just looking at that. That is the governor of Madras, Sri Prakasha. And next to him is M.S. Subbalakshmi's husband, Sadasivam, who is explaining something about the story to him. It's a most wonderful picture, but I'll just play a little bit of Saraswati Bai's voice for you.
நீரனுதினம் வாழ்ந்திருப்பதில்ல ஊரோ நெய்யாக சொல்லுவீரென்ன பேரோ நிர்மையாக சொல்லுவீரென்ன பேரோ என்னை விரும்பி வந்தரும் நான் செய்திடும் தீரோ ஐயா பரதேசி நீர் யாரோ நீர் யாரோ நீர் யாரோ நீர் யாரோ யாரோ
The irony, of course, is that this was the voice that was denied a Sangeeta Kalanidhi by the Music Academy. That was an era when everything was done to ensure that women did not receive the award. Saraswati Bai, unfortunately, was the first woman to be considered for it and therefore denied that recognition as well. When we talk about Tiruvallikeni, can we ever finish a talk without mentioning Subramanya Bharati? Bharati, who lived in the last years of his life in Tulasinga Perumal Street, just off the Tulasinga Perumal Sannadhi. His house, when you look at the photograph, you would imagine that Bharati lived in this large house. But it's only when you go there, you realize that he lived in a one-room tenement in this particular house. When you go inside that room and you see Bharati's verses written on all sides on the walls, framed, of course, now and put up, the first reaction is to burst into tears. Because so much of suffering, deprivation and poverty, and yet such great imagination. Even before, this is his death centenary year, even before he died, 27 years before independence, he had written, Ananda Sudhandiram Adaindu Vittom. We have already attained happy independence. Can you believe this man writing that verse over here? Of course, the house had changed hands several times. It was going to be demolished when the state government acquired it and restored it to a great extent. And today it's a museum in the memory of Subramanya Bharati. The Parthasarathy Swami Sabha, I mentioned it to you earlier in this presentation, is this year 120 years old. It's a remarkable record for a Sabha. Begun in 1900 by N.K. Thirumalachar, after whom there is a school even today in Tiruvallikeni, NKT Girls High School. And the Sabha functioned at various locations in Tiruvallikeni itself. In its last stay in Tiruvallikeni, it was in a place inside Venkatrangam Pillai Street. And on one particular evening during the December music season, Parthasarathy himself would come to the Sabha to give darshan and then go back. Today, of course, the Sabha has shifted to Mylapore. It operates from the Vidya Bharati Kalyana Mandapam, but you cannot deny the great glories of this particular institution. Theosophists also found a toehold. In fact, Tiruvallikeni is one of those locations which is a melting pot of religion. So you've got Vaishnavism, you've got the Thiruvetishwaran Kovil, which is a Shaiva temple. Then you've got the Kelet school. Then you've got churches. Then you've got the big mosque. And then you've got the Theosophists as well. So they began a lodge over here which was called Mani Iyer's Hall, a beautiful little building, interior completely done in mahogany and rosewood. In those days, today we would deal with plywood. In those days, they couldn't settle for anything less than mahogany and rosewood. On the first floor, a jewel of a balcony where only 3 people can sit. Wonderful acoustics. Now, this was the hall where the Music Academy held its conference in the year 1930. And that is when they decided that they would hold a conference every year in December, inviting one musician to preside over the conference, and that would eventually become the Sangeeta Kalanidhi Award as well. So all that took place in this particular building, Raja Hanumantalala Street in Tiruvallikeni, and the building is known as Mani Iyer's Hall. It's sadly outer bound for visitors today, but you can go out, just stand outside it, and you can feast on its beauty. Now, just by looking at this photograph, you would imagine that it's a tower from the High Court of Madras, isn't it? You wouldn't be very far wrong, because the person who built it, and unfortunately his name is not coming back to memory, he wanted to build a structure to which Lord Parthasarathy could come and relax in the month of summer, in the summer season, and he wanted to build it as a replica of the High Court. He got around to building 2 of the 4 towers, but then, the High Court is huge. He couldn't afford to build so much. So this is a small structure. This is called the Davana Utsava Bungalow in Tiruvallikeni. What is very interesting is that Parthasarathy had 2 bungalows apart from his temple. There was Vasanta Bangla, which was the spring season house. Then you had the Davana Utsava Bungalow, which was the summer season house, where Parthasarathy would come. They would decorate the entire place with davanam, which is a cooling herb. Then the idol would be made to sit on a swing, and it would be entertained with music. This is how it happened. Even now Parthasarathy comes to this Davana Utsava Bungalow every year. But at one time, this was the place that you went to listen to music performances and, more importantly, Harikatha performances. Sengalipuram Anantarama Dikshitar was a fixture in this particular Davana Utsava Bangla. We come back to music once again. If you go down Bandala Venugopala Naidu Street in Triplicane, you will come to this house which is from a different era altogether. There are no houses like this anymore in Triplicane, with a small garden space. And then when you go in, the house is to your left, full of memorabilia of this great violinist called Dwaram Venkataswamy Naidu. Dwaram, who lived in Vijayanagaram and was near blind, but was greatly encouraged by the Raja, and he became a violinist. He taught in the Vijayanagaram College, therefore was known as Professor Dwaram Venkataswamy Naidu. Later became a soloist. Earlier was an accompanist in violin, and you know the famous story. He said, if I play well, the main musician is not happy. If I play badly, the audience is not happy. Therefore, I would rather play well and please the audience, and became a soloist and never accompanied anyone else thereafter. Dwaram was a personality by himself. His fondness for cigars, his fondness for collecting rare violins, his ability to play the violin in all kinds of positions. There is a story that he would hang the violin from the collar of his shirt at the back and then play it with a bow like this. And he apparently said that these were all tricks that he had seen itinerant musicians performing in Andhra, and he had picked up those tricks from them. And he had practiced so hard that I'm told that in his village, in his house in Vijayanagaram, the place where he sat became depressed in the plaster because of the number of hours that he had sat and he had actually performed over there. Rabindranath Tagore visited him in Vijayanagaram and actually commended his music. Dwaram was one of the greatest icons we've had in the field of the violin, and his daughter Mangatayaru still lives in this beautiful little house in Thiruvallikeni. I cannot let you go without your listening to a small bit of Dwaram so that you can appreciate his virtuosity. We also have Vaimu Kothai Nayaki Ammal, who lived in Singarachari Street. Legend has it that when she was 10 and she was singing to herself, a mustachioed figure in a turban came, overheard her singing, bounded into the house, held her hands and danced Aduome Pallu Paduome and bounded out again without ever coming back. And that was Subramanya Bharati. So this was the woman who at the age of 10 had enchanted Bharati himself. Kodai Nayaki was illiterate when she was married at the age of 11. She had such a talent for telling stories that her mother-in-law said that a girl from the neighborhood should actually write Kodai Nayaki's stories. Then the mother-in-law encouraged Kodai Nayaki to learn reading and writing. She went on to purchase a defunct magazine called Jagan Mohini, became the first woman publisher in the whole of India. Kodai Nayaki was not just a publisher and a story writer. She was a singer. She performed for the freedom struggle. She released gramophone records, met Mahatma Gandhi wearing a lot of jewelry, and he laughed at her and said, it is very appropriate that you've come in chains because Bharat Mata is also in chains at this point of time. Whereupon Kodai Nayaki took off all her jewels and went on to wear only the Mangal Sutra and Khadi thereafter. Went to prison to support the freedom struggle and remained a feisty personality of not just Thiruvallikeni but the whole of India. If there was a saint in the field of Carnatic music, it was Dr. S. Ramanathan. There cannot be na bhuto na bhavishyati. There can never be another person like Dr. S. Ramanathan who just lived music. The man was so absent-minded that sometimes he would enter the wrong house imagining it was his, because his entire head was just filled with music 24/7. He appreciated music in anybody and everybody. And he was a fixture. This was a Sangeeta Kalanidhi, a professor who had researched the Silapadikaram and acquired a doctorate. He would be at Shastri Hall listening to anybody who performed over there, even if it was a 10-year-old child or a great musician. And he had genuine words of appreciation for everybody. And there is a very well-known story of a child having sung a particular Sangati. Ramanathan applauding the child, people asking him what is so great about it. He said, almost 75 years ago, I have heard the great Kanchipuram Nayana Pillai performing that same Sangati. Today that child performed it. And that is why I felt I had to. So can you imagine the expansiveness of this man's horizons? He lived for appreciating music. He was one of the most saintly personalities we've had in this field. I forgot to add, the girl whom you see on this side is Dr. S. Saumya, Sangeeta Kalanidhi, Dr. S. Saumya. His other very well-known disciple is the singer P. Unnikrishnan. Both of them they were lucky enough to have spent several years learning music from Dr. Ramanathan. We come towards the end of the presentation. There are just 2 or 3 personalities that I have to deal with. T.V. Sundaravalli, who started music learning from Tiger Varadacharya, and whose music so enthralled M.L. Vasantakumari that she said, you have to become my disciple. But family circumstances didn't allow all that. Sundaravalli got married to Krishnan, and perhaps it was all destined by Murugan, Lord Subramanya, because Sundaravalli and Krishnan became champions of Thirupugal. They sang it, they set it to music, they took it to various parts of India. They ensured that several people got to appreciate the beauties of Thirupugal. They set it for dance. She became the evangelist as far as Thirupugal was concerned. Sadly, Sundaravalli passed away a few years ago of cancer. And as Sriram Parshuram wrote very beautifully in his obituary, Arunagiri has lost a champion. That is what he said when Sundaravalli passed away. Tiruvalikkeni is also full of bhajana mandirams all around it. One of these is this Parankusha Dasar Madam, established in 1872. These are all little structures that just open onto the street. And in the old days, people would have sat in front and they would have conducted bhajans. Today, it is impossible to sing in the open in Tiruvalikkeni. These bhajana mandirams have lost their character. They've all converted themselves into temples, which really destroys the meaning of their very existence. They were meant for congregational singing, when people could come and just forget their stresses and strains of the day by shouting in a group if necessary, but still giving full scope to their lung power, getting rid of all their problems by just singing the name of the Lord. That brings me to devotional music, and we can never forget N.C. Soundaravalli in this whole thing. N.C. Soundaravalli, who started learning music, Tiger Varadacharya, went on to learn music right up to Maharajapuram Santhanam, and who created a genre in devotional music with a heavy Carnatic bass. An outstanding personality, also sadly no more today, but who brought Carnatic music to the masses. It was not meant to be an elitist art where, complex talas, esoteric debates on ragas and lyrics and things like that. Just making it devotional and making people rejoice in it. Last, how can I complete a presentation on Tiruvalikkeni without talking about T.H. Vinayakram? Jaya Ganesha Talavadya Vidyalaya has been bringing out so many percussion artists. But Vinayakram is not just a percussion artist. He's an international legend. And when you meet him in person, he is completely oblivious of all that greatness that has surrounded him over the years. So you talk to him about Shakti, you talk to him about McLaughlin, you talk to him about foreign audiences. The only thing he says is, Mahaperiva சொன்னார் அதனால ஏதோ எடுத்துட்டேன். That's about it. Such simplicity with so much of achievement. In reality, he is also a reflection of Triplicane. So much of glory in that little square mile which surrounds the temple. So much of art which very few people realize, and only when you sit back and you begin to document it, that it becomes mind-blowing. Thank you so very much for your patience in listening to me today. Thank you very much.